Today, we talk about World of Tanks console and whether it's still doing as well as it once was just after Christmas since our last discussion video on World of Tanks itself. We're going to jump into some live gameplay. We will literally maybe be being a complete bot within the game, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, what I want to take this video, and of course I want to hear your opinions as well, which are really, really important to everyone. I think it's good to get a holistic view of everyone's thoughts and opinions right now within the game. And of course you can leave those in the comment section down below and we'll run through those after the video ends, and I'll kind of try and reply to as many people. If you've got any questions about the game, I'll also try and help you out with coming up with some suggestions or improvements or stuff, and we can get a good discussion. I think it's really important. But the main aim of today's video is talking about how I think the development of World of Tanks is going with regards to wargaming themselves, with the actual content strategy that wargaming are currently running, and just in general how well I think we can see the game kind of improving and what's likely to come within 2022, because of course this is only 1/3 of the way through, well, just over 1/3 I guess, and that's really where I'm hoping the game is going to improve even more. I think we've seen a lot of improvement since update 6.0, which is of course our kind of like pinpoint, our kind of starting point as to where we kind of, I guess, compare it to in the most regards, because that is kind of the low point of the game and it's definitely gone uphill since then. But the key thing for me in general playing this game as it's kind of evolved over the last year and a half since I've been uploading videos is that you've seen quite a few different aspects of the game get drastically changed as well, with the introduction of Cold War, and I guess that's kind of a talking point that we should go over, at least from my point of view, because I feel like a lot of the time I'm doing tank reviews, I'm giving you information with regards to how you can best play the game, but sometimes we don't actually talk about the game itself and my actual thoughts on the game. But what I want to kind of use this for right now is just how I feel like the game is actually progressing for me personally, and whether I'm still enjoying the game, because ultimately the whole point in playing this game is to enjoy yourself, because if you're not doing that, then what's the point in playing? And I guess that for the most part, a lot of people still enjoy this game, and for me personally, I really enjoy this game as well, but I feel like there are some aspects that definitely need addressing, and the key one being, I guess it's the development of the content. I feel like there's a lot of production of these same sort of premium tanks that we're seeing over and over and over again, where they're basically just the same tank re-released by Wargaming, and it's a little bit boring, I'm not going to lie. They're just introducing the same tanks for over both of the two modes, and it just feels like it's a little bit lazy. Now, I'm not saying it's completely lazy. Is it necessarily too bad? Is it awful? No, but it definitely is a little bit painful when you're just seeing the development team coming up with basically the exact same tanks continuously, and there's not much improvement, there's not much change, there's not much differences between the two game modes with regards to the tanks. Like, the whole point in Cold War for me personally was to improve the kind of diversity of tanks within the game, not just re-release tanks and then call them premium tanks and then sell them, because that seems to be the strategy at the minute, at least for some of the tanks anyway. And it's boring. It's boring to see how Wargaming are kind of taking that route with some of the premiums. But, you know, we can't necessarily, like, really be super annoyed about that. It was probably always on the cards. You know, it's easy content to make and people will pay for it, as I'm sure you're all aware. And somehow we managed to cap, which is always fun, within like 2 minutes of the game starting. But there we go. Regardless of that, what I want to also talk about is how I feel like Wargaming can strategize the way in which that they're maintaining the player base that they currently have by introducing some new aspects of the game that we haven't yet seen before on any version of the game, because I'm all about, you know, introducing console exclusive stuff, and I really want to see that, but we're not really getting that many console exclusive items that I feel like are super rewarding for players that play the game, because yes, an introduction of a new version of the pattern is somewhat kind of interesting, but then again it's still the pattern, like there's not too much change. And I feel like on the World War II side we've basically been getting just you know, any new tanks being a premium tank that we can earn for free, and it doesn't feel like as much of a development is happening as you may want. And yes, I know full well that the Czechoslovakian heavy tanks are coming into the game very, very soon, which I'm really, really happy to see. Hopefully they're not super overpowered. Hopefully they're a little bit more balanced than the PC version have got right now, because it is probably one of the strongest tanks that Wargaming have released on PC in a long, long time. And I'm guessing, given Wargaming's track record with console, that they probably won't be so overpowered as you're used to seeing on the game, because you know how it is with console just basically nerfing anything that is even remotely overpowered on PC into oblivion, which means it's pretty much unusable. Hopefully that doesn't happen. We've seen that with the Italian auto reloaders that weren't even overpowered and they just made them pretty much useless. And you saw with the buffs recently, it feels like there's a lot of a disconnect between the developers and the gameplay style and the traditional meta tanks. It's like Wargaming basically buffing the Italian auto reloaders because they know that the win rate's terrible in them and that they're just underperforming, but then they're like, well, we'll nerf them at the same time, which means that our buff basically didn't really do anything. And yeah, I just don't see a lot of the strategic decisions by Wargaming, whether they be from an actual like standpoint of trying to improve the game. It feels like in most cases it's probably not that, and that's kind of an unfortunate sake. I really did want to see some improvements actually happen, but maybe that's just not what Wargaming are aiming for in terms of like their idea of the development of the game. Maybe they're not going for like overall amazing improvements to the core gameplay, and maybe it's just a case of like they just want a few tweaks, a few changes, and go that route with the World War II mode, because there just isn't that much development, at least from my point of view, that is like really super beneficial for us as World War II players, or at least me being a predominantly World War II player. Now, I'm not saying that everything has to be focused around one aspect of the game, because there is definitely two aspects, and I enjoy playing Cold War, especially the light tanks. I feel like those are the ones that I actually really think are super underrated. It's really, really fun to actually play them, and I would actually recommend anyone that hasn't already played them to get their hands on one of the Cold War tanks and be able to do some things like that, because for me personally, I think that they offer a lot more than what a lot of tanks might offer within the game, and I think that that's interesting to see how much of a difference there is between all of the various different game modes that Wargaming have released, and just the tanks in general. Like, there's so much room for you to basically play how you want to now. Like, there's not so much of an incentive for you to basically play set tanks or set tank lines. Like, there's a lot more opportunity for a bit of diversity within the game, which I'm never object to, and I'm really happy that Wargaming have kind of gone that route with the game, because ultimately we're the ones that have to play the game, not the developers, and so if we get a good game, then everyone gets a good game. And so yeah, I'm glad about that. It looks like we're going to get taken out, but never mind, we'll jump into a next replay here. Well, so we're kind of talking and ranting, I guess, or not even ranting, but just throwing down some of my thoughts. I think these sorts of videos, although, you know, there's a lot of information packed in, a lot of thoughts and opinions, and probably there's going to be some conflicts of thoughts as I go through, because it's just me trailing off a load of stuff. But I think for the most part, you guys also feel in somewhat the same way. I see a lot of comments that kind of are in the same mindset as me anyway. And I'm not saying that like what I feel or think is definitely like the way to go, but you know, it's interesting. I really enjoy these sort of videos where we discuss, and I actually like seeing you guys will go and, well, actually Eclipse is not that bad, some of the things are different, so this is really good, this is really bad, I actually think that what you said was good was actually bad, and all of this sort of stuff. Like, it's all extra and it's interesting to see. And I mean, going into this next gameplay, in the background we're playing artillery, and that's something I really wanted to focus on within this video, is also artillery pieces and how Wargaming are going to change them over this next year, because we all know, if you've watched any of the videos recently on my channel, about the Artillery 2.0 changes that will be coming at some point during this year. And by Artillery 2.0 I mean that Wargaming are going to be changing the core artillery mechanics within the game's seems somehow they have not detailed exactly what they will be doing, but there will be changes, and that is really exciting and also scary at the same time, because you never know, we might end up with a more overpowered artillery, which is something nobody wants. But hopefully that doesn't happen and we can go on with our days not having to fear the artillery as much as we do currently. I feel like the kind of alpha damage that we're seeing with the artillery now is horrible. It really is horrible how much damage artillery can do in one singular shell. Now, there's always comments, and I mean there's always comments that are like, well, you know, artillery doesn't always do damage, you know, you miss and stuff like this, and it's like, I'm not talking about like the fact that the tanks are going to be like, if you have an artillery piece on your game, you're going to win and you're going to somehow like be able to carry the entire team playing a T92 HMC. But what I am saying is that it's just not very fair for the opponents that you're hitting to be able to deal like, what, 2,250 damage if you pen with AP, and if you pen with HE it's like even more ridiculous. I think that is kind of my problem with it, is that the ability to one-shot, and you've seen it with all of like the changes with the kind of artilleries. Not necessarily the T92 in particular, but also pretty much all of the artillery pieces, and you're actually seeing changes to the American artillery first, actually, and Wargaming have confirmed that they will be changing the American artillery, which is actually super interesting. I'm interested to see what Wargaming's ideas of what they're going to do is actually going to change, how it's going to change, and what they're aiming to actually do with the class, because for me, I think artillery, the key thing, as we've talked about just then, is the actual alpha damage and how much damage it can do in one go. You just saw literally one barrage managed to do 1100 damage as a tier 8 artillery, and it's like, for the most part, that AMX 13105 or 1390 basically had no chance of basically being able to do anything to me, which is the problem. Like, I can deal damage to people, take nearly 1,000 hit points worth of damage off of them, and they basically cannot do anything against me, and that is the problem. That I think is that it doesn't really reward anyone except from the artillery player, and even then half the time it's like so boring to play artillery. It's like, wow, I can deal this amount of damage, and like, yeah, wow, I'm able to like derp a super conqueror for like a couple hundred damage. It's like, yeah, it's not even that fun. And then half the time you then just leave the flank because the flank's failing and you can just move out the way, and it's like, yeah, not particularly the best, kind of most intuitive and most rewarding for anyone on the team, which is also a problem that I'm finding currently. However, I do want to put in a caveat though. I don't want to be seeing artillery pieces that are just completely super high rate of fired classes, because it's just going to be even worse. Like, the fact that you'll be able to basically just like fire every like 20 seconds with a T92 to be able to deal maybe like 700 damage now. I hope that the changes are more that they're going to introduce some sort of smoke mechanic that you can now use, similar to the World War II or the Cold War game mode on World War II, where now artillery might be able to fire smoke or something a little bit more interesting, a new way of balancing them rather than just like completely changing the alpha damage of them, which I feel will probably benefit people more, and I feel like they'll get a hell of a lot less hate, because if they make them worse, if they make them actually increase the rate of fire and all of these changes that they could potentially do, then there's a big risk that they're going to basically annoy everyone, and that is definitely something that Wargaming really won't want to do, and hopefully we won't see that within the game, but you never know, it's Wargaming, we could see all sorts of weird and wacky things happening, but yeah, luckily we won't see that, and you can see within this game we only managed to deal one actual full barrage of damage and still picked up 1,100 damage, and it's like, only, yeah, kind of showcases that, you know, good players basically are limited by the RNG, but it means that everyone can still do like a stupid amount of damage to one tank if the RNG goes their way. So yeah, I'm not a fan of artillery as it currently is. I'm looking forward to the changes, but I hope Wargaming kind of consult the community before bashing out like a widespread, horrible nerf to them, or in Wargaming's eye a nerf, but then in everyone else's idea a buff. So hopefully we don't see that. Maybe we'll see more actual introduction of actually artillery having to move around the map rather than just sitting at the back, or maybe some form of limitation that they can only fire so many times within a square. I don't even know. I don't know what the best idea is, but maybe that's just a horrific idea. But you guys can leave that in the comment section down below. Now then, one thing, obviously the new season's coming out and I want to talk about that as well. Obviously, with this season, we saw a lot of Cold War tanks come out, and a lot of the season rewards are kind of geared towards playing the Cold War game mode. They're basically releasing all of the season rank 100 rewards as basically Cold War tanks. And so what I want your opinions of is, do you want to see a lot more diversity between the season pass rewards? Because you can see here we got a few World War II premiums, but the actual rewards at the end, the supposed like best new rewards, were all just basically tanks that were already in the game, or at least to some degree like Cold War tanks that maybe you don't want to actually have. And so my question, or my kind of discussion right now, is on what do you think of Wargaming season passes? Are you a bit disappointed? Because back when they were first released, I felt like they got a very, very good mix of between the World War II tanks and also the Cold War tanks. Because usually you had one Cold War tank at tier rank 100 and one like World War II tank at tier 100, and we saw the introduction of things like the Object 268 version 5, which I don't know if I agreed with, but it came into the game regardless. And also, we also saw like the introduction of some World War II, Cold War tanks as well. So it was a good kind of mix. Whereas in the recent seasons, it feels like Wargaming are kind of throwing the Cold War content down your throat. For me personally, it doesn't really bother me. A lot of the premium tanks, you know, I could probably get anyway, because Wargaming basically loan them to me to be able to review for you guys and let you know whether you actually should purchase the Wargaming's recent tank that they've released for like 30 quid or however much it might be. And so, yeah, that's kind of handy for me. But for the majority of people, you know, you want a tank at the end of it that you're going to be able to play, or at least will enjoy playing. And if all of them are Cold War, then it's never good. And vice versa, if all of them are World War II, then it's not good either. So getting that mix. You'll note with the new season pass, where you may be watching this video after the new season has been released, which is Steel Beast, which features the Leopard 1A1, which is essentially a Cold War tank that has come in with the German tanks that are coming in to the game. And currently within the background footage of this video, you can see that we don't actually have any German tanks. So we'll be seeing them pop up within the Western Alliance tech tree, I expect, very, very soon. And we'll be seeing them kind of fill out the German line, where you can probably get like the Leopard 1A2 and the Leopard 1A1 and all of the various Leopard variants that come out, Leopard 2A1 and stuff like that, I believe, off the top of my head, but don't quote me on that. I'm sure that all of the German tanks will be coming into the game, at least the newer version, the modern tanks versions of the German tanks. And of course, we'll probably end up with Mauses within the first era and stuff like that, as Wargaming usually introduced just tanks that were already in the game as the first 3 or era 1. Then you go into like 2 tanks that were, or 2 or 3 tanks that were already in the game at era 2, and then at era 3 they're usually tanks that we haven't actually seen before, or new tanks, or like upgraded versions of tanks that we've seen with the Chieftain Mark 11 and stuff like that. And yeah, so it's always good to kind of get new content, which I agree with. It's just making sure that there is that diversity, which Wargaming have got definitely wrong a couple of times, but we can't berate them too much, because at the end of the day, it's free content. You don't have to grind the season pass, and you shouldn't expect to get loads of stuff that you exactly want. Sometimes it just doesn't go your way, and they can't please everyone, which I agree with, but equally you could please the majority, and that's hopefully what we'll be seeing within the game soon. So hopefully this was a good rant video / discussion video, and just overall just wanting to get your thoughts on the various different tanks that are coming into the game, on all of the different changes that Wargaming are implementing, and in general just basically seeing what everyone's opinion is. Do you think World of Tanks is good right now? Do you see World of Tanks being bad? What would you do to change it? What would you do to amplify the game? Or what would you do to basically stop it being as bad as maybe it is that you think within World of Tanks? But thank you very much for watching this video. Don't forget, if you don't know much about the new season, I have done a video that covers all of the information for the Steel Beast season that has come out, and that will be linked on screen on the left right now, as well as a gameplay and tank reviews playlist that you can go on and get to grips with a load of different tanks that we've got in the game. Plenty of them have been reviewed. In fact, most of the tanks on screen right now have probably been reviewed within that playlist. And of course, there will be plenty more coming out in that playlist as well. So thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully you do join me in one of those videos, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.